You wake up with a plan. Today you're finally going to read that book that's been sitting on your shelf for months. You pour your coffee, sit down, open to the first page. And then a notification lights up your phone. A few taps later, you're watching a reel, then a second, and just like that it's already noon. You tell yourself, I'm just too busy today, maybe tomorrow. But here's the truth. It's not about time. It's about how your mind interacts with your environment. And once you understand that reading a book a week won't feel like a challenge, it'll feel inevitable. Let me explain. Most people don't realize how many hours they already have. Not just hours in general. Reading hours. The average adult spends over 20 hours a week scrolling through social media or watching streaming shows. That's enough time to finish War and Peace twice. So why don't we read more? Because we've been taught the wrong approach. We're told to push harder, to make time, to just be more disciplined. But reading isn't a battle against your schedule. It's a system, a flow, a rhythm that starts not with motivation, but with design. Think about this. When was the last time you had to remind yourself to brush your teeth? Probably never. You don't negotiate with yourself about it. You don't wonder if you'll have the willpower. You just do it, every day, automatically. Why? Because it's embedded into your system. You've built a habit that no longer asks for your attention. Reading can be the same way. But first, we have to stop seeing it as a chore and start seeing it for what it truly is. An act of identity. Every time you pick up a book, you're not just absorbing information. You're casting a vote for the kind of person you want to become. Someone who is curious. Someone who grows. Someone who doesn't just consume content, but chooses content that builds. But that transformation doesn't happen all at once. It starts small, page by page, moment by moment. And that's where the real shift happens, because the truth is most people fail at reading more, not because they're lazy, but because they're relying on willpower in a system designed for distraction. Let me say that again. They're trying to read against their environment, not with it. You can't win a battle with your phone by trying harder. You can't finish a book when every corner of your life is pulling your attention away. But you can build a reading life that feels as natural as scrolling through your feed. And it starts with 3 truths. Your reading habit is a reflection of your environment, not your motivation. Small, consistent actions always beat sporadic, heroic efforts. The best system is the one you'll actually use, not just the one that looks good on paper. Now imagine this. Instead of trying to carve out extra time, you turn ordinary moments into reading moments. 10 minutes with coffee, 5 minutes waiting for a meeting, 15 minutes before bed. That's 30 pages. And that's a book every 8 days. Without changing your life, just reframing how you use it. But we'll go deeper than just page counts, because the real transformation happens when reading stops being an activity and becomes a reflex, like reaching for your phone, like checking the weather, like taking a breath before you speak. It becomes the default. The only difference? This default feeds your mind, strengthens your focus, and builds your future. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through the entire system. We're not just going to talk about how to read a book a week. We're going to build a world around you where not reading feels stranger than reading. You'll discover why finding time is the wrong strategy, and how to use environmental triggers to create effortless routines. How reading multiple books at once can supercharge your comprehension and focus. The way your physical space is silently shaping your attention, and how to architect it for deep focus. Why retention has nothing to do with memory and everything to do with connection. And how to transform everything you read into measurable real-world change. This isn't just about books. It's about becoming someone different, someone whose life is constantly expanding, whose thinking grows sharper every week, whose ideas are clearer, conversations deeper, and actions more intentional. Because you didn't just read, you transformed how you read. And by the end of this video, you'll never see reading the same way again. Let's begin. The first thing you need to understand is this. It's not about having more time. It's about having a better system. Reading a book a week doesn't begin with clearing your schedule. It begins by shifting how you see the little spaces in your day. Most people treat reading like a luxury, something reserved for quiet evenings, long weekends, or when life finally slows down. But life doesn't slow down, and waiting for the perfect moment to read is the reason most people never finish a single book all year. That's where the 30-page rule comes in. It's not a productivity hack, it's a mindset reset. Most books fall between 210 and 280 pages. If you read 30 pages a day, you'll finish a book every 7 to 10 days. That's around 50 books a year, without stress, without burnout, and without sacrificing your life. And here's the secret. 30 pages don't have to happen all at once. Read 10 pages in the morning, 10 on your lunch break, and 10 before bed. That's it. That's all it takes. But here's where most people struggle. They rely on motivation. They wait to feel like reading. But readers aren't made from motivation. They're made from triggers. Triggers are anchor points in your daily routine. Your morning coffee, the subway ride to work, the quiet after brushing your teeth. If you tie reading to something that already happens every day, you remove decision fatigue. It stops being, "Do I have time to read?" and becomes, "This is just what I do here." And if you really want to unlock another level, read multiple books at once. This sounds chaotic, but it's actually a game changer. Reading only one book often creates pressure. If it's boring, you stop reading altogether. But if you have 2 or 3 books, one that's deep, one that's light, and one that's inspiring, you can match your mood. If your brain feels tired, go light. If you're focused, go deep. You don't force it. You flow with it. This strategy has another hidden benefit. It creates cross-pollination of ideas. Something you read in one book will echo in another. Concepts begin to overlap. New connections spark. Suddenly you're not just learning, you're integrating. You're seeing patterns. You're developing your own philosophy. And that's what turns reading into wisdom. Still, many people worry about retention. What's the point of reading if I forget everything? But here's the truth. Reading isn't about memorizing. It's about transforming. You don't have to recall every line. What matters is how the ideas shape you. Your thoughts change. Your language changes. Your decisions shift. And that's the real return on reading, who you become while doing it. That said, there are simple ways to boost retention. Underline sentences that hit you. Take quick notes in the margins. Pause and say a powerful idea out loud. Or better yet, teach it to someone else. The act of expressing what you've read forces your brain to process it more deeply. When you say it or write it, it stops being the author's idea and becomes yours. Imagine this. 1 year from now, you've read 50 books, 50 different worlds, 50 unique voices speaking into your life. Do you realize what that does to your mindset? Your confidence, your ability to understand people, solve problems, see patterns? It changes the entire way you show up in the world, and none of it starts with hustle. It starts with rhythm, with small daily moments reclaimed. The 30-page rule works not because it's extreme, but because it's gentle. It fits into your real life. It respects your limits, and that's why it lasts. The truth is, most people don't need more time. They need more intention. They need to take the scattered 5-minute windows they waste scrolling and fill them with something that nourishes them. Reading doesn't take energy. It gives it. It doesn't drain you. It centers you. And in a world obsessed with speed, choosing to read is an act of rebellion, a quiet, powerful stand for depth in a shallow world. So if you want to read more, don't wait for the right moment. Create it. Make reading part of who you are, not as an achievement, but as an alignment. Because once you become someone who reads consistently, everything in your life starts to level up. The clarity, the focus, the creativity, the calm, and, yes, the direction. And when people ask how you manage to read so much, you'll smile. Because the truth is, you never forced it. You just stopped waiting and started building a different kind of day. If you want to become someone who reads a book a week, stop trying to change your habits. Start changing your identity. Because here's the truth. Your actions will never outpace the story you believe about yourself. You can try every productivity hack. You can download the top 10 apps. You can buy a Kindle, set reminders, and even create a fancy reading tracker. But if you still see yourself as someone who struggles to focus or never finishes books, none of it will last. Your brain always fights to stay congruent with your identity, and identity is shaped by repetition and environment. The real shift doesn't begin with reading. It begins with saying, I am a reader, not I'm trying to read more, not I should read more, just I am. Because when your identity aligns with your goal, everything else becomes effortless. It's not something you force, it's something you express. And identity is built in the small moments no one sees. When you reach for a book instead of your phone in a waiting room, when you read a few pages instead of scrolling before bed, when you carry a book with you, not as an accessory but as a tool. These moments aren't dramatic, but they are the blueprint of change. They tell your brain, this is who we are now. There's something sacred that happens when you begin to act from identity. You stop chasing results and you start embodying values. You read not to impress anyone, but because you're someone who learns, someone who seeks wisdom, someone who knows they're still becoming, and that internal shift begins to reflect outward. Your language changes. The way you respond to conflict evolves. Your capacity to reflect deepens. And people feel it. They don't know what changed, but they sense the depth, the steadiness, the quiet authority of someone who spends time in thoughtful spaces. Let's be honest, most people are reactive. Their time is stolen by distraction, their thoughts are shaped by noise. They're living surface-level lives, drowning in inputs but starving for meaning. And in the middle of that chaos, a reader stands out. Not because they know more, but because they feel more. They live slower. They listen longer. They ask better questions. You see, reading isn't just about books. It's about becoming someone who is comfortable with stillness, someone who can sit in silence, someone who doesn't need constant stimulation to feel alive. And that level of self-possession, it's rare, it's magnetic, and it's what sets you apart in any room. But there's another truth you need to hear. You don't have to finish every book. Yes, I said that. Not every book is meant for every season. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is put a book down, not out of failure, but out of alignment. Time is your most precious asset. Don't waste it forcing your way through content that doesn't speak to you. When you embrace this, reading becomes fluid. It becomes intuitive. You stop measuring success by how many pages you've read and start measuring it by how deeply you've been moved. Some books will stay with you forever. Others will give you one golden insight, and that's enough. You're not collecting trophies. You're cultivating transformation. And yes, there will be days you don't feel like reading. Days when life feels heavy, when your brain is tired, when the words blur together. That's okay. Don't use those days to judge yourself. Use them to rest. Because when reading becomes an act of love, not pressure, you always come back to it. Reading, at its best, is not a chore. It's a ritual, a return to self, a place where you meet your thoughts, confront your biases, and uncover parts of yourself you didn't know were waiting. And the more you read, the more you realize you're not alone in your questions. Someone, somewhere, wrestled with the same tension, the same ache, the same doubt, and they left a trail of words for you to follow. Books are time machines. Each one is a conversation across centuries. When you read, you're not just learning, you're communing with minds who dared to wonder, with souls who dared to feel, with thinkers who chose clarity over comfort. And slowly, page by page, that courage becomes yours too. That's the deeper identity shift. You're not just a reader, you're a bridge between eras, between ideas, between chaos and calm. You become someone who sees beyond headlines, someone who builds perspective, someone who refuses to be swept away by the trends of the day, because you've anchored yourself in something deeper. Imagine what your life looks like a year from now, not just with 50 books on your shelf, but with a mind that's sharper, a heart that's softer, a soul that's more grounded. Imagine walking into a room and not needing to prove anything, because your confidence is built on wisdom, not noise. That kind of transformation doesn't come from scrolling. It comes from presence, from choosing every day to feed your mind something real. And the most beautiful part, it doesn't require talent, just intention. You don't have to be the smartest, you just have to be consistent. And in a world addicted to speed, Your slowness becomes your superpower, because the person who reads really reads isn't just gathering information, they're cultivating insight, depth, direction. You become the kind of person who pauses before reacting, who considers before judging, who listens before speaking, and that makes you rare, not loud but luminous. So if you've been telling yourself the story that you're too busy or not a reader, rewrite it today. Say it out loud. I'm a reader, not because of what you've read before, but because of what you're choosing today. That's how identity works. It's not something you earn. It's something you claim. And once you do, once you start walking through the world with that quiet confidence of someone who lives in books, the change becomes permanent, not because you tried harder, but because you finally aligned who you are with how you live. That's not just about reading, that's about becoming. If identity is the foundation, then systems are the architecture. Because it's not enough to say, I am a reader. You need to give that identity a rhythm, a routine, a home. Most people try to rely on motivation, but motivation is fleeting. Systems are sustainable. They carry you when your energy fades. They guide you when life gets messy. They don't require you to feel inspired. They just need you to show up. And that's the secret. Discipline is not about willpower. It's about structure. So let's talk about what a real reading system looks like. Not a rigid checklist, but a living ecosystem that adapts to your life. It begins with two things: time and friction. If you want to read a book a week, you need to find time, and you need to reduce resistance. That doesn't mean carving out 2 hours every day. It means becoming intentional with the pockets of time that already exist. Commutes, lunch breaks, waiting rooms, the 15 minutes before bed. These moments are the soil. Reading is the seed. Most people let these spaces get filled by noise, endless scrolling, mindless content. But the person who values growth sees opportunity in silence. Start small. Set a 5-page goal, not 50. Momentum builds faster than intensity. Once you open the book, you've already won. And the truth is, 5 pages often turns into 10, then 20. Because starting is the hardest part. That's where friction comes in. Make reading effortless to begin. Keep your book visible. Put it on your pillow. Leave it on your desk. Load audiobooks onto your phone. Replace your home screen with your reading app. Remove the decisions, lower the barriers. Make it easier to open a book than to open a distraction. Then, design your environment, where you read matters. You don't need a perfect library with ambient lighting and lo-fi music, though that's a bonus. What you need is a consistent signal, a chair, a table, a blanket, a time of day, something that tells your brain, this is where we read. Habits thrive in context. The more consistent your environment, the faster your system becomes automatic. No debate, no negotiation, just rhythm. But here's something else most people miss. Track your progress, but not obsessively. Don't turn reading into a performance. You're not collecting points. You're cultivating growth. Still, a simple system helps. A log, a notes app, a journal, something to capture what you've learned. What moved you? What made you think? Because reading without reflection is like eating without digesting. You forget what you consumed, but when you capture it, even briefly, it stays. And over time, that creates wisdom. Patterns emerge, connections form, your inner world deepens. Let's also talk about choice. One of the biggest traps in reading is indecision. People spend more time picking books than reading them. So here's the rule. Don't overthink it. Keep a short list. When you hear a recommendation that speaks to you, write it down. Create a digital note or a physical list. And when it's time for a new book, go to the list. Trust your past self. You'll move faster and avoid the spiral of hesitation. And always have your next book ready. Don't finish one and then take a week to choose the next. Momentum fades fast. Keep the fire alive. Another trick. Read multiple books at once, but with intention. One book for the mind, one for the heart, one for the soul. For example, a practical non-fiction, a memoir, and something spiritual or philosophical. That way, no matter what mood you're in, You have something that fits. It removes the excuse of not feeling like it. You're always aligned with at least one. Let's take it deeper. Make your reading multi-sensory. Use a highlighter, sticky notes, annotate the margins, talk to the book. Let it be a conversation, not a lecture. Ask questions, argue, reflect. That interaction imprints the ideas. They go from abstract to embodied. You don't just know the content, you've lived it. And here's a bonus. Share what you learn, not to impress, but to express. Teaching deepens retention, even if it's just a voice note to yourself, a message to a friend, a social post, a private journal. When you translate what you've read into your own words, it becomes part of your language, your lens, your leadership. But I'll give you a warning. The more consistent you become, the more resistance you'll face. Not from the world, from yourself. You'll feel bored some days, restless, distracted. That's normal. That's the brain detoxing from dopamine addiction. Push through. Because the real reward of reading isn't the knowledge, it's the rewiring. It's the inner quiet that comes when you realize you don't need to be entertained every second. It's the mental clarity that follows silence. That's the power few talk about, but once you taste it, you'll never go back. Reading also gives you something rare, long attention. In a world of 15-second content, you become someone who can hold a thought for hours. You learn to follow an idea from beginning to end, and that ability translates into every area of your life. Conversations, work, creativity, leadership, emotional regulation, all of it improves, not because you tried harder, but because you trained your mind differently. Let's get honest. Most people say they don't have time, but it's not time they lack. It's alignment, it's systems, it's identity. The person who scrolls for 2 hours a day doesn't have a time problem. They have an intention problem. And once you fix that, once you create a system that supports your identity, you become unstoppable. Reading a book a week no longer sounds extreme. It becomes obvious, and yes, life happens. You'll miss a day, you'll fall behind, you'll lose focus. That's okay, don't quit. Don't throw away the system. Return, recommit. Reading is not about perfection, it's about presence. Consistency beats intensity every time. So build a system that forgives you, that welcomes you back, that says you're still a reader, even if you paused. This is how transformation happens. Not through one big moment, but through 1,000 quiet returns. A page here, a chapter there, a deep breath before opening the cover. It all adds up, and the person you become in the process, that's the real win. You don't just finish books. You finish the old story of yourself and begin a new one. Here's the truth no one tells you. When you start reading consistently, not just for entertainment but for meaning, something inside you begins to shift, quietly, slowly, but undeniably. It's not just your knowledge that grows, it's your awareness, your perception, the way you move through the world. You start seeing yourself differently. You start noticing the patterns you used to live by, the habits, the beliefs, the unconscious programming that shaped your decisions for years. And suddenly you have words for things you could never explain before, because reading doesn't just fill your mind, it expands your soul. Every book becomes a mirror, a portal, a challenge, a reminder that you're not alone, that someone, somewhere has walked this path before you, and they left a map. And as you read their words, you feel less afraid, less confused, less broken. Not because the book fixes you, but because it reminds you that healing is possible. That growth is real. That meaning can be made out of anything, even pain. You begin to realize something powerful. Your life is a narrative, and for the first time you can write it with intention, not reactively, not based on fear or pressure, but from a place of clarity, a place of authorship. You stop letting circumstances dictate your identity. You start creating yourself from within. That's the inner evolution. It's not loud, it's not flashy, but it's life-altering. Reading gives you new lenses. You don't just look at the world, you see into it. You notice the subtext of conversations, the motivations behind behaviors, the wounds that people carry but never name. Your empathy deepens. Your curiosity expands. You stop judging so quickly. Because now you understand everyone's story is more complex than it appears. Everyone is fighting a battle you can't see. But here's the unexpected part. As your inner world evolves, so does your outer world. You begin to speak differently, with more precision, more intention. You choose your words like an artist chooses colors. You stop performing. You start communicating, not to impress, but to connect. And people notice. They lean in. They trust you more. Not because you're smarter, but because you're more grounded, more whole. This is how leaders are born. Not by shouting, but by reading, reflecting, integrating, becoming. Because a person who reads deeply becomes a person who lives deeply. They don't just react, they respond. They don't just consume, they create. They don't just exist, they evolve. And here's something else. Reading teaches you to be alone without being lonely. In a world addicted to noise, that's a superpower. You stop fearing silence, you embrace it. You realize that solitude isn't emptiness, it's intimacy with yourself. And in that space, your real voice emerges, the one that isn't shaped by trends or opinions, the one that's been waiting for you to listen. Books become your companions. Not in a codependent way, but in a nourishing way. They hold space for you, they challenge you, they remind you of your potential. And when life feels heavy, when the world feels chaotic, you can always return. To the pages, to the silence. To yourself. But let's be honest, this inner evolution isn't always comfortable. Sometimes a book will shake you, confront you, hold a mirror so sharp it cuts. You'll read a sentence that hits too close, a truth you've avoided, a story that sounds too familiar, and you'll want to put the book down. But if you stay, if you breathe through it, you'll come out changed, softer, stronger, more awake. That's the paradox. The more you read, the more you realize how little you know. And that humility, that openness, is where wisdom begins. You stop needing to be right all the time. You start being curious, you listen more, defend less, grow faster. Because now you're not just building knowledge, you're building character. And character is what carries you when knowledge fails. You also learn how to suffer better. Not to avoid pain, but to transform it. You read the stories of people who've lost everything and rebuilt, people who were betrayed and forgave, people who were misunderstood and still spoke their truth, and you see yourself in them. You gather strength, perspective. You realize you're not the only one who feels lost sometimes, not the only one who doubts. And in that realization, a new kind of courage is born, quiet, unshakable. Reading also gives you language for your intuition. You begin to name the feelings you once dismissed, the instincts you once ignored. You learn to trust your inner compass, not just because it feels right, but because now you understand why it feels right. You've seen the patterns. You've studied the psyche. You've read the biographies. And through all that knowledge, you find yourself not someone new, but someone real, someone you've been becoming all along. This is the transformation most people never expect. They start reading for knowledge and end up finding themselves, their essence, their calling, their voice. And from that place, life becomes richer, not easier, but more meaningful. Every moment carries weight, every interaction has depth, because you're no longer living on the surface. You're rooted, present, awake, and that's what makes you extraordinary. Not your IQ, not your resume, but your depth, your capacity to hold paradox, to ask better questions, to see beauty in pain, to keep growing when it's hard. That's what sets you apart. And books are your companions on that journey. So yes, read for knowledge, read for skills, read for performance, but never forget to read for your soul, for your healing, for your wholeness. Because the greatest gift of reading isn't what you learn, it's who you become. So now, the question isn't, how can I read more books? It's who do I want to become by reading them? Because your life is not just a series of days, it's a collection of meanings. And each page you turn is a quiet rebellion against a distracted world. Every book you finish becomes proof that you chose presence over noise, that you chose depth over distraction, that you chose to show up for yourself. You won't always remember every chapter. You won't always highlight every quote, but you will feel the difference in the way you think, in the way you pause before reacting, in the way you listen, not just to others, but to your own voice. And that is priceless. Reading one book a week is not just about speed. It's about alignment, about rhythm, about keeping your soul in motion when everything else around you feels stuck. And the best part? You don't need perfect focus. You don't need hours of free time. You just need intention. 10 pages in the morning, a few minutes before bed, small pockets of stillness that compound into transformation. Because this journey isn't about finishing books. It's about becoming someone new because of them, someone braver, someone clearer, someone whole. So if you're still wondering whether it's worth it, whether this habit really matters, look in the mirror 6 months from now and ask yourself, do I recognize the person I've become? If the answer is yes, if your voice is stronger, your thoughts sharper, your heart lighter, then you'll know reading didn't just change your schedule, it changed your life. Now go. Pick up that next book and begin again.